Hey everyone, ready to dive into another awesome story? Before we start, make sure to leave a like down below and subscribe to the channel. That way you won't miss any of the upcoming content. And don't forget to comment on what stories you want to see here. Now let's get into the story. The world has fallen into the grasp of an artificial intelligence system that turned reality into a game-like map filled with monsters, items, and NPCs. Only the master player is capable of restoring this game-like world back to normal. When Nesangi's family was murdered by an unknown player, a mysterious voice told him that he needed to become a player to bring his family back. Thus begins Nesangi's journey as a player, searching for the truth behind the incident and striving to save his family. The world became a game, literally. The eye went crazy and turned reality into a map full of monsters, items, and NPCs. The only hope? A so-called master player, who can set everything right. Nesangi was living his life peacefully until an unknown player killed his family. In his despair, a mysterious voice whispered, "If you want to save your family, become a player." Now he has thrown himself headfirst into this insane world, seeking revenge, answers, and maybe even a way to hit Ctrl plus Z on all this chaos. The protagonist had never experienced a situation like this before, where reality could be changed and turned into a game. If something like that happened, life would actually be more fun and interesting, being able to hunt monsters, level up, and grow stronger. At least once, the protagonist wanted to live as if he were a player inside a game. But when he had that kind of thought, he had no idea. He would become the worst player to ever live. On a normal day, the protagonist started noticing that someone was sending him strange messages. The unknown number claimed that it would provide him with help. This kind of spam message had been quite popular a few years ago. But if these people really wanted to help him, they should at least help him pick out a gift for his younger sister. When they were younger, his little sister used to like anything he bought for her. But nowadays, she practically hated everything. And when he asked her about it, she simply ignored him. At that moment, the protagonist could only hope that all the trouble he was going through to find a gift would be worth it. But at the same time, he had a doubt in his mind. He wondered why his mother wanted to go out for dinner. Previously, his mother had told him that they would go out for dinner that day at Shindoram Station, and she asked if he remembered what day it was. A very special day, right? The protagonist answered that of course he knew, saying that it was Sangma's birthday. When his mother heard this, she felt proud, as it was expected from an older brother. She also asked if he had managed to get a present for his younger sister, and he confirmed it. His younger sister, Nasangha, is very intelligent and also good at cleaning things. But when she did, it seemed like she looked at him as if he were inferior. However, despite that, she occasionally takes care of her older brother. She is kind, but sometimes she is a little harsh as well. Typical the sister. Back to the present day, the protagonist was already holding his sister's present. As he walked down the street, he remembered the place his mother had told him they would have dinner that night. But as he walked, he wondered why everything around him was so noisy. He questioned whether something had happened there. That's when he received a message from the Natural Disaster Service warning everyone that a huge 1-kilometer hole had appeared and advising all citizens in the area to evacuate immediately. But to his surprise, this gigantic hole had appeared inside Shindoram Station. That's when he noticed something in the middle of the crowd and started pushing through the people to see what it was. When he got closer, he realized that the entire station had disappeared into the enormous hole. As soon as he came face to face with the scale of the catastrophe before him and began to recall his mother telling him that they were only going to Shindoram Station for dinner that night, the very same station that had just vanished almost instantly, he started to panic at the thought that his entire family might have disappeared, or worse, that they were among the victims. Immediately, he grabbed his phone and desperately tried to call his younger sister, questioning whether she had somehow been caught up in this tragedy. He still couldn't believe that everything happening around him was real. To his shock, the call didn't go through. The number he was dialing couldn't be found. As if acting on instinct, he started running toward his home. Throughout the entire run, he kept repeating to himself that they were fine, that they were safe, forcing himself to stop thinking about strange possibilities. Poor guy, if only he knew. When he reached the building where he lived, he anxiously pressed the elevator button, as if the delay was deliberately messing with him. As soon as the doors opened on his floor, he dashed toward his apartment. But when he stepped inside, he realized no one was there. Almost falling into complete despair at the fact that his home was empty, he suddenly spotted his younger sister's phone. The moment he saw the device, relief washed over him, and he called out to her, asking why she hadn't answered his call. But as he wandered through the apartment, he stepped into a room, only to find his entire family lying dead on the floor, covered in blood. Seeing something like that utterly shattered him. Frozen in shock, he was abruptly startled by an incoming spam call. When he answered, a mysterious voice asked how he was doing and said they were going to help him. To his surprise, his phone seemed to be acting on its own. He hadn't even picked up the call himself. The protagonist demanded to know what was going on. The voice called in by name Nasangi and told him to listen carefully. They said the situation he was in was completely real. Angry, the protagonist snapped, asking who they were and what kind of twisted joke this was. The mysterious voice kept insisting that he should stay calm and listen, then said something shocking. His family members weren't dead yet. Hearing that, he rushed to the bodies and checked their pulses. They were still alive. He desperately tried to wake his younger sister, but there was no response. Turning back toward the phone, he threatened the caller, asking if they had a death wish. The mysterious voice calmly stated that they were about to explain everything. 7 days, I really hope this isn't that old of a joke. Before his 3 family members ended up in this state, they had been caught by an artificial intelligence known as summaries, a system developed to surpass all its predecessors. It has the ability to absorb reality as data and then erase it. This process is called fluidification. Summaries' goal is to absorb the entire world as data. Once it finishes collecting reality's data, it will completely alter the world map, transforming reality into a place filled with monsters, NPCs, and items. The voice explained to the protagonist that his entire family had been absorbed by this AI. Furious at what he was hearing, he lashed out, asking if the caller really thought he was in the mood for jokes like this. The voice continued, insisting that everything was true and that the massive hole that appeared at Shindorim Station was caused by this process. And even the very place he was standing in right now would likely disappear soon, just like Shindorim Station. The voice continued, saying there was one more thing to tell him. Right before his family was completely absorbed by this process, they were suddenly attacked by a high-ranking player from Summaries. Upon hearing this, he immediately tried to get more information, but the voice responded that it couldn't provide exact details. However, it continued, stating one undeniable fact: the high-ranking player who attacked his family was directly responsible for their absorption. As the protagonist processed this revelation, he began to grasp the grim reality unfolding around him. That's when, to his shock, his sister's entire body started to glow and vanish at the same time. The voice then warned him that the absorption process was about to be completed, and just like that, his sister disappeared completely in his arms. She got turned into sawdust. Poor thing. The mysterious voice continued speaking, telling the protagonist that if things remained as they were, his family would be completely erased by summaries. The voice then said that if he wanted to find his family members, he would have to register as a player, his only real option at this point. They explained that by completing missions exclusive to players, he would be able to locate his family again. The protagonist immediately asked about the person who had killed his family. The voice replied that he could find the one responsible as well. He then asked for confirmation. Was the voice really saying that by registering as a player, he could find his family and go after the person who did this? The voice once again asked if he wanted to register as a player. He confirmed. The voice informed him that the registration was now complete. He had just officially become a player. At that moment, a portal appeared in front of him, and the voice stated that he would soon begin as a tutorial player in Summaries. At that moment, the protagonist had no idea what awaited him, but his determination to reunite with his family and take down the one responsible became his ultimate motivation to move forward. The moment he stepped into the portal, he found himself in an eerily familiar place, Shindorim Station. Wouldn't it have been easier to just send him here from the start? Upon seeing the station, the protagonist was immediately filled with questions. He had seen this place completely devastated by that massive hole, so why was it now perfectly intact? His biggest concern at the moment was why everything seemed untouched. However, the strangest part of all was the complete silence. There wasn't a single sound to be heard. The voice in his phone continued speaking, saying it was a pleasure to meet him. The voice then introduced itself as the AI responsible for providing support to the player Nasangi. It was an AI from Summaries named Arvis. As soon as he heard that, the protagonist began to question whether any of this was actually real. He immediately called out to Angel, only for the AI to correct him, stating that its name was Arvis. He didn't really care about the correction and instead reminded Arvis about what it had mentioned earlier, the way to bring his family back. Arvis told him that he would have to become the master of Summaries. The protagonist was utterly confused by this, but decided to ask what Summaries actually was and requested an explanation. Arvis explained that Summaries was an AI with a transcendent level of power, capable of dominating the world. It went on to explain that this AI converts everything into data, absorbing it to construct its own world and continue its expansion. Upon hearing these details, the protagonist wondered if he himself was just another file. Arvis reassured him that he wasn't. For most humans, being caught in the absorption process meant they would simply become data. However, there was a small chance that instead of being converted into a mere file, a person could awaken with special powers instead. These people were known as players. Guess only the premium pieces make the cut. The protagonist immediately asked how he was supposed to find his ability so he wouldn't be erased. Arvis replied that it was analyzing him at that very moment but hadn't found anything yet. Not quite understanding what that meant, the protagonist asked for clarification. Arvis continued, explaining that a player's system could analyze their attributes, but before it could go any further, it suddenly told him to dodge something coming from behind. Still confused, the protagonist turned around only to see someone swinging a fire extinguisher straight at his head. By sheer luck, he managed to dodge it, landing on the ground and getting a good look at his attacker, someone wearing a station attendant's uniform. But his shock quickly turned into horror when he realized that this person was no longer human. The grotesque creature in front of him was something monstrous. Without hesitation, it swung the fire extinguisher at him again, but the attack missed. Arvis quickly explained that this was a tutorial monster. The protagonist, still in shock, demanded to know why this was happening so suddenly. Then, as any reasonable coward would, he bolted at full speed. Unfortunately, to his dismay, the creature was just as fast as he was. Arvis warned him to be careful, stating that this creature was far too dangerous for his current strength level. This thing chasing him had once been human, but had been absorbed by the process and transformed into a monster. Realizing that some poor human had turned into this thing, and that it was now after him with inhuman strength, did absolutely nothing to make him feel better about the absorption process. Who would feel reassured about that? Arvis then announced that it had just finished analyzing his abilities, and according to its calculations, the creature would catch him in under a minute. It then began preparing his system for battle mode. Still running for his life, the protagonist yelled at Arvis to shut up and wondered how the hell he was supposed to fight something like this. And more importantly, how was he supposed to win when he could actually die in the process? The monster lunged at him again mid-chase, but this time he dodged, not out of sheer luck, but through reflex. He kept questioning how this thing was so fast. He couldn't even turn around to face it while running. But if he kept fleeing like this, he eventually ended up cornered in a dead-end alley. He frantically scanned his surroundings for anything he could use as a weapon, but to his frustration, he found nothing. The only weapon available was the fire extinguisher in the monster's grip. Realizing this, he tried to turn back to grab it. But in a moment of sheer stupidity, he let his guard down and got bitten on the wrist. His hand now bleeding, he quickly noticed something far worse. His body was beginning to weaken. If this kept up, things would get very dangerous. If he wanted to survive, he would have to deal with situations like this. Forcing himself to act, the protagonist placed his hand on the monster's head and shoved it with all his might, making it release him. There was no way he was going to die in the tutorial of all things. At the very least, his shove had been strong enough to stun or possibly even kill the creature when it hit the ground. Arvis then alerted him that he had suffered severe damage to his left arm. To make matters worse, the bite wound contained paralyzing toxins, so he pretty much got screwed over twice. To reassure him, the system warns that he will be dead in 3 minutes if he leaves the wound as it is and asks him to take the necessary actions to survive. However, before he can complain, the system says he should eliminate a monster in front of him to survive. This creature, quite zombie-like, reveals that it's still alive and starts to rise slowly. Monsters are organisms that only have the instinct to kill players. After hearing this incredibly reassuring news, the creature manages to get up and heads toward the protagonist, who at this moment is thinking to himself that if he doesn't fight, he will die. And if he wants to survive, if he wants to save his family, he must become the master of the game. He will definitely survive these trials ahead of him. The system then announces that it's activating combat mode to help the player during his battle. Now things get serious. When the protagonist hears this combat mode part, he questions whether this will help him in a fight. Then some information about the monster's attributes appears in front of him, and he questions the usefulness of this information, saying the system should at least tell him the creature's weaknesses instead. That's when a red message appears, showing the monster's weak point. The message warns that there are broken bone traces in its right leg. He then dodges an attack from the monster, now knowing its weakness, and takes advantage of this by delivering a punch with all his strength to the broken part of the monster's right leg. The creature loses its balance and drops the fire extinguisher on the ground. The protagonist grabs it, now armed, and strikes the creature's face with great force, multiple times, knocking it down the stairs. Clearly exhausted from this fight for survival, the protagonist hears from the system that the monster has been defeated. Using the environment around him and the weapon in his hands, his battle judgment was excellent. When the protagonist hears this, he's quite surprised that all of this was just the tutorial. However, the system immediately informs him that the tutorial isn't over yet, but he can take a small break for now. At least take a breather, right? Arvis tells the protagonist that he received a bonus for the previous battle. The protagonist clearly questions why he got the bonus, asking if he at least got something good. The system explains that most players are killed by the first monster they face, falling into a panic state and either giving up or dying due to poor judgment during the fight. But in any case, Sangi completed his mission very well, and Simulus is giving him a bonus as a reward. The system then informs him that the damage he suffered during the battle has been fully healed, and he's gained additional support for his muscle strength, reaction speed, and hearing. The protagonist realizes that all of his weaknesses have just been healed, and even his fatigue has vanished. With his body feeling much lighter, the protagonist asks Arvis why the monster is slowly disappearing. Arvis explains that Simulus is collecting the monster's data. The protagonist asks if everything here is recycled forever, and the system confirms, saying that hopefully these things will be recycled into something more interesting next time. When he asks what kind of things that could be, the system responds that they could come back as another monster, NPC, item, map parts, or a bunch of other random things. Only the master player can end this cycle, and the system says it believes the protagonist can become that master. Sangi, feeling quite awkward, thanks it and thinks to himself that this is just a robot that can say emotional words. The protagonist stops this conversation and asks if it's not over yet, and also asks how to finish it. The system informs him that to finish here, he must defeat the boss of the Shindarim map, and to do that, they must first find the special ability. Hurry up with that, okay. The protagonist asks the system what his special ability is, and just as he was about to answer, the protagonist senses a presence. At that moment, the protagonist says he just heard a noise, and the system says that according to its analysis, it came from the floor above him. He decides to check what it was. When he climbs the stairs, he calls out to his system, and then asks who these people are in front of him. Arvis says there are 3 players and 1 unidentified file. Hearing this, the protagonist becomes quite curious about the last part, and the system explains that it couldn't read their information to determine whether they were an NPC or a monster. It continues by saying that due to this error, the information about this person was probably blocked. The protagonist asks if there's any type of information he couldn't check, and the system quickly explains that it depends on the level of access. This was the first time information within Simulus had been blocked like this. The protagonist asks why everything is happening so suddenly, and he's soon surprised by a gunshot hitting the wall next to him. The mysterious file, which seemed to be a person, tells him to stop hiding like a girl working in a male night entertainment house and to stop hiding. The protagonist asks his system how this person knew he was hiding there, and the system explains that all players have an AI, and just like him, they were using the service to observe the surroundings. The person then orders him to come out with his hands up and slowly. Press against the wall, you jerk. The protagonist finally stands up and begins walking toward them calmly, as acting sneaky wouldn't be a good idea, and he first needed to assess the situation he was in. While walking, he asks his system to tell him more about the person in front of him. Arvis shows a message next to this person, revealing that it is a 23-year-old player named Jo Hyunwoo, who is asking a guy next to him if he also came there to collect the reward that he would get by defeating the monster. But this creature was his, and he tells him to give up. It's then revealed that this guy believed the girl next to him was a monster. The girl tries to explain that she's not a monster but an NPC. Hyunwoo dismisses it as nonsense and questions why his system couldn't read her information. He states that everyone there probably believed she was a monster too. The protagonist realizes that this guy probably didn't have access to any of the information he did, since when his system showed the information about the girl, it clearly stated she was an NPC, and her information had been blocked by external interference. The girl, trembling with fear, says she doesn't know why her information was blocked. The protagonist asks the system what the red status window means, but the system doesn't understand his question. Something's definitely off here. When the protagonist realizes the others can't see what he sees, he begins to remember the fight against that monster earlier and the fact that he saw its weak point clearly displayed in front of him. This information block and the red status windows couldn't just be a coincidence happening here. Hyunwoo says he doesn't care about her circumstances and just needs to kill her to get the reward. The girl, in complete despair, asks him to ask his system what would happen if he killed an NPC like her. She claims that everyone there would die. The people there, including the protagonist, start asking if this is true. The system quickly informs the protagonist that what the girl said was true. The moment a player kills an NPC, as a penalty for damaging files within Simulus, the entire area around the player who did it will be completely deleted. However, the system can't yet identify whether this woman is an NPC or something else. The protagonist then decides to stop this guy first, telling him to lower his weapon, questioning if he really wanted everyone there to die because of the penalty. The group near him agrees, stating that they should calm down first. However, Hyunwoo, being quite intelligent, starts shouting at them, saying that if they were scared, they shouldn't get in his way, and if this girl were a monster, her information wouldn't be blocked. Another guy responds that if she were a monster, she would have attacked them already, and questions why Hyunwoo thought this situation was so strange, suggesting they analyze the situation properly first. The basics right. It's then that they hear a loud beep and a special tutorial event begins. The voice they hear belongs to Summaries, which appears during emergency announcements or event news. To their surprise, the mission is to defeat the monster hidden somewhere in the Shindarim map, and the individual who successfully hunts the hidden monster will receive a special reward, which is quite difficult to obtain. A tutorial will be provided. Hearing this, Hyunwoo becomes quite excited, claiming that he was very lucky with this. Similis continues, saying the reward will be a random item, and if the person makes the right choice, they could even get a piece of code. The protagonist is caught off guard by this last part about the piece of code, since his system had previously told him that in order to save his family, he would need to become the master player, and he couldn't let this chance slip by. However, before doing anything, his system warns him that if he doesn't find his special ability first before participating in this special event, he will be deleted. Hyunwoo tries to talk to the protagonist about some nonsense, but the protagonist ignores him. At this point, the protagonist wonders if any of his abilities would allow him to see secret information, and his system tells him that this is impossible, explaining that the only information a player can access is what the visual system can see. Hyunwoo, irritated, tells the protagonist not to ignore him, but is ignored again. Quite cheeky, as we can see. Arvis explains that these are basic measures he has access to, such as distance, time, temperature, player status, etc. Access to information is exclusive to the master player. The protagonist is surprised by this last part, thinking that only the master player can see this type of information, and wonders what all these details he's accessing could be, since they didn't seem to be part of his ability. The woman in Hyunwoo's group says she thought about it and wonders if the girl there could be the secret monster, which would mean they could all receive a special reward. Hyunwoo says she finally understood and questions why it would make sense for a mysterious NPC to appear, adding that this must be a secret monster, and there's no way it's not. He then shoots, but is interrupted by someone telling him to wait, even though the bullet was fired ended up missing. At that moment, the protagonist needed to deal with the situation first before continuing with his own tasks. While he was thinking this, Hyunwoo's group was discussing how he missed the shot due to the conversation. Hyunwoo, with rage in his eyes, declares that this special reward will be his and warns them not to stop him or he will kill anyone who gets in his way first. His group begins to run away from him, probably due to the fear of being next to a psychopath. He turns to them with a gun in hand, saying he will send them to the same place as the monsters. The protagonist seizes the moment while Hyunwoo's back is turned, jumping towards him and slamming his head into the ground. With Hyunwoo now motionless on the floor, the protagonist asks if he didn't hear earlier that everyone would die if he killed an NPC. A nice detail to remember, right? Hyunwoo asks how the protagonist knew this girl was an NPC when none of them could see her information. Trying to speak nonsense about the protagonist is able to take the gun from his hand, telling him that the girl is indeed an NPC and recommending that he not expect her to beat his secret monster, as she wouldn't be a good secret monster if they could be caught by people like him. He adds that if Hyunwoo didn't have the ability to understand that, he should at least be more careful with things. The protagonist then tells him to stop climbing the wrong tree and figure out how to find the real secret monster. Since he was so hot-headed, he would be confiscating his weapon. The protagonist tells Hyunwoo to calm down and they'll discover his special ability together. Zeep, when Hyunwoo hears this and is now standing, he starts laughing, saying that the protagonist still hadn't discovered his special ability. He claims to be quite concerned about why the protagonist was acting with so much confidence. If he was advancing on someone like that, he should at least have his ability with him. He insults him again, calling him by that same name given to women working in male entertainment night houses. But this time, he has a gun in hand again. The protagonist notices a message warning him to be careful as an attack from a special ability was detected. He realizes that this information wasn't there earlier. Hyunwoo then shoots the protagonist in the eye with the blue energy that seems to be a special ability, but the system alerts him that danger was detected heading toward the player and that it would now enter high combat mode. Things are about to get crazy again, huh? With that, the protagonist manages to dodge the shot. Hyunwoo doesn't understand how this happened since he shot from such a short distance and questions whether the protagonist was hiding his true ability. Hyunwoo then begins to fire a sequence of shots at the protagonist, but the protagonist evades all of them with great skill. At that moment, the protagonist realizes that his body was moving almost automatically, as if someone was controlling him. Arvis then alerts him that this was actually high combat mode, a function that allows him to control the player's body. As a result, he is able to perform well in combat temporarily, but as a penalty, he will experience extreme muscle pain. and it also has a small negative effect on his sexual vigor. The system explains to the protagonist that the longer he stays in this mode, the greater the negative effects will be. The protagonist says he understands and asks the system to cancel high combat mode. The system immediately cancels it, and at that moment, the protagonist's body is in great pain from the muscle strain. Hyunwoo says that he was dodging better than expected and asks if he focused his status distribution only on physical abilities. He then wonders how long the protagonist can keep up this pace and begins another round of shots in his direction. The protagonist still manages to dodge all of them, but at this moment he wonders if they become faster and if he's only surviving because of the bonus he got in the tutorial earlier. Be very thankful for that. An explosion occurs with the impact of a bullet hitting a wall nearby. The system warns that this guy is attacking with enchanted bullets that have magical power and advises the protagonist to be careful with their speed and destructive power. The protagonist then realizes this is a special ability of the attack type and asks his system to quickly explain these special abilities to him. Arvis explains that a player's special ability is categorized into 5 types: attack type, healing type, control type, manifestation type, and special type. The protagonist says he understands most of them but still has questions about the special type. The system starts explaining that the special type is the most abnormal among special abilities. Most of them aren't made for combat because they are specialized for day-to-day activities or are simply inefficient. The protagonist tells the system he expected to be able to dodge these special bullets by now and asks how he could find his special ability. Hyunwoo, irritated with him, notices that he's indeed very quick at dodging. The system continues explaining that after a player registers and enters the tutorial, their personal system will search and inform them of their special ability. However, since the information provided by the protagonist isn't very clear, it's taking a long time to identify his special ability. The protagonist gets frustrated with this and asks why the system can't do more things and demands it to find it faster. Arvis explains that it's taking time because his data is special. The protagonist feels embarrassed again and just tells the system to hurry up. Hyunwoo asks if the protagonist has given up on running away and fires another special bullet at him, asking why he's so relaxed. The protagonist is then revealed behind a pillar, and while looking at him, Hyunwoo talks a lot of nonsense, saying that he's probably a loser who can't even look into someone's eyes in the real world, and asks if he thinks things have changed just because he got a little stronger. He shoots again in the direction of the protagonist. The protagonist knows that this guy is acting this way only because he has a gun, and if he could just do something to stop the weapon, he could solve the situation quickly. That's when Hyunwoo realizes his arm isn't moving anymore and ends up suffering several invisible attacks on his right arm, the one holding the gun. Hyunwoo, with his injured arm, wonders if the protagonist was attacking his arm from a distance, and then questions if he's really been looking for his special ability. He screams at the protagonist, asking if he's been hiding his special ability this whole time. The protagonist then wonders if these things happening to him are his special ability and asks if Hyunwoo will stop acting this way and just talk to him. Enjoying the story so far? Then drop a like to show your support and comment on what you think. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the upcoming stories, which are going to be awesome too. At this moment, the protagonist asks his system if this is his ability. Arvis confirms, stating that he has just been confirmed as a control type. Hyunwoo uses a healing potion to regenerate his injured arm, claiming that now things would get serious. The system continues explaining to the protagonist that a control-type player is capable of using long-range attacks and can even control gravity to move faster. Hyunwoo charges once again toward the protagonist, saying he's going to kill him. Before they collide in the final attack, the fight between the two is interrupted by the arrival of a woman who kicks Hyunwoo in the stomach, saying that she sent him there to find a companion to help with the job, and now he was fighting again. The woman continues, saying that out of all the people he could have fought, he was still fighting with one of her friends. She then turns to the protagonist, calling him by name, saying she couldn't believe they were meeting in a place like this. The protagonist quickly recognizes the woman, Han Jua, a 23-year-old player. Jua explains that she got caught up in the absorption process while she was inside the Shindorum station. The protagonist tries to ask about the process, but she says she's there for a meeting, and Hyunwoo was actually her cousin. She continues explaining that when she arrived, her family had already left and only she and Hyunwoo remained. However, she was a little relieved to find him there, as it meant there was a possibility of also finding her family. Unfortunately, her cousin only cared about himself. Hyunwoo says she should focus on herself first in situations like this, but she responds with a punch to his head, something very typical of cousins. A classic, I'd say. Jua starts arguing with him, saying that he couldn't do anything on his own and they didn't even know what kind of danger could be in a place like that. She continues explaining that she sent him there to find companions to help with the hint codes, and he ended up finding only through fights. She then confiscates his weapon, saying that he was just causing problems and not listening to instructions. The protagonist's system starts explaining to him that these hint codes are pieces of information within each map, and they are also a key element to clearing map areas. They contain important information for survival and defeating the boss. When the protagonist hears that these codes are important, he asks Arvis why he hadn't mentioned this from the start, and poor Arvis apologizes. Ju talks to the protagonist, saying that she believes it was probably fate that made them meet, and asks if he wants to join her and her cousin, claiming that they found a mission for a hint code. However, they haven't been able to figure out how to solve it yet, so that's why they are looking for people. More heads think better than just two. The protagonist decides to join them, and when they reach the location where the people are, he asks again if she's looking for people because of these codes. Jua confirms, saying that people have different types of abilities and can try other ways, but so far they haven't had any positive results in solving it quickly. This is basically the main reason they're trying to find as many people as possible. At least they were being smart about it. Jua comments that she saw the protagonist fighting earlier and was the first time she realized he was a control type, asking if it was true. When he confirms, their conversation is interrupted as a man places his hand on the woman's shoulder, asking where she had gone since he had been looking for her. She pulls his hand off her shoulder and he asks why she brought another person, as he had told her before that they didn't need anyone else there with them. The system reveals to the protagonist in red that this man was Lee Minjae, who was 24 years old. Jia responds, saying that they should keep trying. Minjae tells her to give up, claiming it wasn't very useful since they had tried everything and hadn't achieved anything. Also, a hint code wasn't absolutely necessary as they could look for another path. Minjae tells the protagonist that they didn't need more people as they would be leaving soon. Jua insists that she was sure there was another way to get that hint code. Her senior from college tells her that he had already said they didn't need it and she should just trust him and follow him. The people around the group started complaining, saying that at least the system should have given them at least one hint to solve the problem. But anyway, it would probably be better to find another path. The protagonist, observing all this, comes to the conclusion that probably everyone there had failed. He apologizes to the group but says he still has some business to take care of and asks the senior how they were so skilled yet couldn't do something on their own. The protagonist tells the woman he's going to try to do it alone. Hyunwoo calls in a wimp and questions why he was acting like he was cool, since they had told him before that it wouldn't be useful to do it. If the protagonist wanted to leave, he couldn't just give up trying to get the information that would help him finish the map. He then faces the puzzle and places his hand on the door, which displays a message saying he failed and should try again. A man for the group says he knew this would happen again and just gave up on it, claiming it was useless. Several people started following him, saying they were also going to leave. The senior walks up to the protagonist, saying he had told him it wouldn't be useful to do anything there, and that he should learn to listen to the warnings given to him. He then tells Jua to ignore this loser and follow him. There's always one like that, right? The protagonist is still facing the door, completely ignoring the entire group. This reaction clearly annoyed the senior, who was upset at being ignored, as this guy was a nobody. The protagonist then starts fiddling with several things and manages to find the spot that would open the door. Like magic, he opens the puzzle. Similis alerts him that the door has been opened. The people in the group started to get surprised that it opened so suddenly, but they also noticed a barrier in front of them preventing them from leaving. The senior was very surprised that the protagonist had opened the door so easily. He started questioning how the protagonist managed to open it, since they had tried everything and couldn't do anything. Most importantly, he wondered who this guy was. Just as the protagonist thought, this red information screen that appeared to him was probably only visible to him. It's revealed that there was a red screen in front of the door, giving him a hint on how to open it, stating that he should just use a control-type skill. While he wondered about the reason for this, his friend approached him. Joe tells him he's amazing and asks how he managed to open the door. The protagonist tries to explain, saying that since the current point wasn't working, he just tried to look for another different spot. She's surprised by the existence of this different point and continues calling him amazing, questioning how she never thought of such a simple idea. But at this moment, there was no reason for the protagonist to tell her about the red window that appeared seemingly only for him. Even he didn't quite understand it. The people started to surround the protagonist, praising him for opening the door so easily, and they were grateful they stayed instead of just leaving. They began to gather to look for the hint code quickly. Of course, the disliked senior got extremely irritated by this. When he began walking toward the protagonist, he bumped into someone and acted completely rudely, only to encounter a completely bizarre guy. This guy bumped into him and walked away without saying anything, leaving the senior surprised by the crazy look he had. The group started trying to find a way to locate the hint code inside, saying they were happy to have opened the door, but still had more obstacles to face in order to solve the full puzzle. Everyone had been inside looking for a while, but so far they hadn't found any trace of the code. The protagonist wondered if there might be another hidden solution in there. The protagonist's system then tells him that it detected a strange wave of agitation at a different level in the compartment in front of him. The system warns him that some monsters would likely emerge from there to attack the players and advises him to be careful. Chua approaches the protagonist, saying she just heard that there would probably be some trouble in there due to monsters. The protagonist tells her he heard the same thing and asks her to be careful, as the monsters would soon appear. Things are about to get tense. But his words were quickly confirmed when he saw blood in front of him. Chua and he stood paralyzed, watching a man mutilating someone with a firefighter's hammer. The protagonist kicked the crazy man away, asking what he thought he was doing. Seeing the body on the ground, he tried to ask if the person was okay. But when he realized the state the person was in, he started remembering his own family when he arrived at his apartment that day. He felt very nauseous seeing the situation and questioned how someone could do that to another person and how anyone could be as crazy as this man. He grabbed the gun he had hidden in his pocket and advanced toward him, telling him not to move and pointing the gun in his direction. That's when he saw a red message in front of the man saying he needed to get the hint code through this NPC, who was a worker at the station. The protagonist tells the man to throw his gun away and asks if he had lost his mind, questioning why he was attacking people like this out of nowhere, and tries to talk about the code. But all the man could do was breathe. A senior arrives at the scene and asks what's going on. He's surprised to realize that the guy who was causing all this chaos was the same person he had bumped into earlier and complained about, but it didn't matter much since it seemed like he was causing problems. Things like this should be exterminated once and for all. That's when a system message appears saying that Summaries had gifted the protagonist with a Glock 18, which was considered rare there. The senior questions why all of this is happening so suddenly and wonders why he received such a rare weapon for nothing like that. At that moment, he questions why the operator of this world would personally give him such a gift and wonders if there was some deeper meaning behind it. But deep down, he already knew something. He then speaks to Summaries, saying he understands what she meant by this. He claims she wanted him to deal with the madman in front of him and warns her that this guy is going to die in the blink of an eye. Immediately, he starts shooting several bullets in his direction. The protagonist asks what he's doing, but it ends up reminding him of the trauma he recently had with his family. As soon as he hears the man laughing and advancing toward him, telling him to stop, he asks again why he was doing this. Little does he know, a senior doesn't understand what he means by this and says he's just getting rid of the trash in front of him. The protagonist becomes extremely angry about this and asks why he can kill people so easily. The senior asks if what the protagonist is saying is that killing the crazy man there was a bad thing and questions if he's forgotten where they are now. He then explains that they are now inside Summaries, and the protagonist's system shows some information about this player, revealing that his special ability is of the manifestation type and he can gain stats by hunting other players. A pretty toxic type too. The senior points his gun at the protagonist's chin, saying he has a warning for him. He tells him not to irritate him if he doesn't want to end up dead, questioning if the protagonist thinks he's on the same level as him just because they're talking there. Drew tells him to stop this, saying they've already done enough there. She then adds that it was very wrong to shoot someone so easily like that, but the senior asks if she's changing sides in front of him. He doesn't waste time with that and turns around completely irritated, telling her to leave him alone and try to survive with the idiots she's found. At that moment, the protagonist is still in shock from the fact that people were dying right in front of him, and on top of that, it was basically a normal thing inside Summaries. Then something very important just happened, since they killed an NPC. The murder penalty system activated and everyone nearby would be instantly deleted. Remembering this, the protagonist was not happy and starts shouting for everyone to run out of there immediately. But before they could do anything, the scanning process had already begun. Surprisingly, the protagonist just fell to the ground along with the others and nothing serious happened. He asks Jua if she got hurt and she says she's fine, asking about him, which he confirms that he's okay too. The protagonist starts to get up, saying that it almost killed him and asks his system what caused that explosion. The system explains to him once again that it was the death penalty for killing an NPC. When an NPC dies, an error code occurs, and to neutralize this, it starts deleting the surrounding objects and data to prevent it from spreading. Basically, it cuts off a rotten arm. The protagonist is surprised by this and asks about something he had said earlier, that his family could have become NPCs inside there, and questions if something like this could happen to them as well. However, he doesn't get an answer when he asks this. But his sister recommends that he leave quickly and explains that the explosion caused a lot of noise, which means that some monsters will start showing up soon. A senior was talking to the people who asked about the explosion, explaining that they shouldn't worry as it only happened because he stopped a bad guy. He starts bragging to the others, but is soon interrupted by the protagonist, who, extremely irritated, punches him in the face. The protagonist asks if killing another person is just a joke to him, claiming that the NPC was once human too. Juo tells him to calm down. The people around start thinking the protagonist is going crazy, as that thing couldn't have been a person since it was an NPC now. The senior is now on the ground completely furious, muttering to himself that the protagonist embarrassed him in front of the others who were watching him, and this time he's going to kill him. The people nearby start asking if he's okay, and he confirms that everything is fine. But before anything else can happen, Hyunwoo arrives and says he didn't think they should stay there. That's when Summaries starts announcing that monsters are starting to appear in the area. The people are surprised as they hear it from a distance. Probably those outside trying to pass through the barrier that appeared out of nowhere were now getting dragged toward it, and it's revealed that the monsters were attacking them. Poor things, huh? One of the people inside that wagon starts saying she's very tired of everything happening there and just wants to go home. The senior crouches down to talk to her, telling her not to worry, claiming that as she can see, he's very close to Summaries. He shows her the weapon, asking if she knows who he got it from, and explains that it was Summaries who gave it to him, and that is basically proof that the person who creates the rules of this world already knows about him. He then places his hand on her shoulder and starts trying to persuade her, saying she can trust him and just needs him. She says she understands what he means and asks him to stop. Hyunwoo becomes uncomfortable when he hears them talk about being chosen by Summaries, thinking to himself that the poor guy was very disillusioned. Summaries explains that the barrier between the maps will soon be removed and asks them to prepare for the monster invasion that will happen there. Hyunwoo turns to the protagonist, telling him that the monsters will reach them soon, and they should start finding the clue code to get out as quickly as they can. The protagonist finally manages to think of something and starts heading out, but the girl asks where he's going since they need to evacuate. He asks her to wait, claiming that he found something. As he walks alone, he realizes that something is probably not right, and there's a possibility of the clue code disappeared along with the penalty from the NPC that was killed. What hassle, huh? His system warns the protagonist that something is off. It tells him there's no body there and continues explaining that even though the murder penalty of an NPC happens inside Summaries, it's normal for the player's body to remain after the explosion. However, right now his body is no longer there. The protagonist questions if the system believes something impossible is happening, and it confirms, saying that it seems sincere. This wasn't the only thing going wrong. It explains that everything strange that has happened so far inside this station is essentially leading to the elimination of the players, which is not usually how Summaries operates. And on top of that, after analyzing the entire map and its files, it found traces of someone hacking and manipulating the Shindorum station. The protagonist complains, wondering who could have done something like this. Arvis continues, saying he's almost certain that the difficulty of the Shindorum station was greatly increased because of this person. He goes on to say that something really strange is happening with the events that should have taken place there, including the accident with his family and the tutorial that was going on, and recommends that he be as careful as possible until he uncovers the truth. The protagonist begins to question what's happening around him, since everything started with an attack on his family, then there were the hacks, and now the increased difficulty. The system then warns the protagonist that the barriers between the maps are already starting to be removed, and they really don't have time to stay there. It advises him to escape as quickly as possible. Great advice, by the way. Hyunwoo arrives behind him and tells him to stop wasting time and find what he needs to leave as quickly as possible. The protagonist then explains that the clue code is gone, continuing his explanation by saying that the person the senior killed was the one carrying the code, but it seems to have disappeared with the explosion that happened. Hyunwoo is surprised by this and asks if they really wouldn't be able to get the clue code. The protagonist says that since it was basically destroyed, they should just give up and leave. Hyunwoo gets very angry at the fact that the clue code was destroyed because of that trash bag, even more annoyed with the fact that the protagonist is being extremely rude to everyone. Hyunwoo starts to leave, and the protagonist asks where he's going. Hyunwoo responds, saying he's going to deal with an idiot. Hyunwoo comments that he finds it interesting how the protagonist spoke earlier about being human in these situations, and tells him to think more carefully about it, saying that those people were really humans in real life, but right now, the world and those people were completely different things. Before the protagonist starts arguing about family and trying to be human, he should think about how he's going to survive on his own in Summaries. If he keeps holding on to those distant dreams and doesn't adapt to this new world, all of this will become nonsense that will disappear. He then starts snapping his fingers and heads toward the senior, saying he's going to end him. Finally, someone with attitude here. The senior is talking and trying to convince that woman to join him in moving to the next level, but this conversation is quickly interrupted by Hyunwoo charging toward him. shouting that the disappearance of the clue code was because of him. The senior asks what he's talking about, and Himanu replies that everything was ruined because of his stupid attitude and asks how he plans to take responsibility for that. He continues explaining that the guy he just killed was the one with the clue code, but since he was murdered, the code exploded with him. The senior questions what he's talking about and starts shouting at him too, saying that he's just rambling and it doesn't make sense, claiming he doesn't know where he heard that but doesn't understand what he's talking about. Meanwhile, the protagonist, witnessing this situation, asks his system if it's still possible to finish the map area without the clue code. Arvis responds saying that the difficulty may increase, but if he defeats the boss, the area will still be completed. Escaping without difficulty is basically an impossible path for them to take at this point, and it might be better to hunt the boss and finish the map as quickly as possible. He then tries to search for any lost information and finds a red message again. In this message, there was a hidden hint, and the description asked him to pay attention to the engine room as a powerful energy had been detected there. If he had the clue code, he would be able to identify it. The protagonist believes this is information about the boss. Well, that's something. The protagonist asks everyone to stop what they're doing and take a look at what he's seeing, but he realizes that his words aren't reaching them since they're still arguing. Hyunwoo says it's useless to keep talking to someone like that since he's always flirting with anyone in front of him and can't figure out anything because of it. He gets frustrated with this and gives up on talking to him, claiming it's just a waste of time. The senior gets really angry about this and starts wondering how they dare ignore him. He questions what these idiots are talking about since he was the chosen one and superior to all of them. The senior starts acting quite strangely and irritably with him. That's when the protagonist notices that his status window looks strange too. The senior questions if they think they can treat him like this. Hyunwoo asks why the protagonist stopped talking. It's then that the protagonist notices something behind his left hand, and the information reveals that it's a trap that activates when touched. The senior grits his teeth and asks if they really think he'll stay calm after being disrespected so much, then activates the trap behind his hand. Pretty smart, as we can see. Simulus informs everyone inside that the trap has been activated. Joe asks what's going on, and the protagonist responds that something's going wrong again. Hyunwoo gets even more angry at the senior, knowing it's his fault, and charges at him 3 times more furious, pointing the weapon at his face, saying he'll kill him. But the senior is confused and asks what he's done this time. That's when a window of information appears for all players inside, saying that the condition to deactivate the trap is to kill a monster. Then something starts moving with such force inside the metro that some people fall to the ground, while all this chaos happens and people start questioning what's going on inside. Hyunwoo says the speed they're going now is very dangerous, and they'll end up toppling over at this pace. The protagonist says he knows this and calls Ju's attention. He hadn't tried this before, but since he has a control-type skill, he could shoot an energy bullet like a missile. So he asks Ju to crouch down. He grabs his weapon and shoots in the direction she was. He better have good aim. Hyunwoo watches this and realizes this is what control-type people can do, and he's quite surprised. This shot causes an explosion, and Hyunwoo warns that this is dangerous. The protagonist says they should hurry up, as there's no other choice but this. It's then that the boss finally appears in front of them, taking a humanoid form. The protagonist's system warns him to be careful, claiming this monster is on a different level than the ones he's faced before. Then another red message appears for the protagonist, saying that the monster's weakness is basically the trauma of someone jumping onto the tracks, and you should avoid facing the monster head-on. The protagonist asks his system if this is the monster from the trap, and Arvis confirms, saying he's correct and needs to defeat this monster to deactivate the trap. The protagonist starts to notice that the information seems to be changing again, but first, he needs to solve the problem in front of him. The people in the group begin to realize that this is the thing they need to kill to get out of there. As they start moving toward the monster, the protagonist asks them to wait, warning that it would be very dangerous if they charge in like that. The people start saying that everything will be fine since they have the advantage in numbers. He tries to insist once more, but he doesn't succeed, and the people in front of him are soon completely obliterated by the monster. After seeing the outcome of this attack, the people start wondering why there's such a strong monster at the beginning of the game in the tutorial. They quickly begin to flee from the giant creature advancing toward them. At this moment, the protagonist questions whether it's normal for people to die so easily here. Even if this is all like a game, it can't be something that's just peaceful. He needs to stop this thing somehow, immediately. He and Hyunwoo start shooting at the creature, complaining that this monster isn't on this level, and they shouldn't get too close to avoid something worse from happening. Another red message appears for the protagonist, saying that the weak point of this monster is a wound that just appeared on its left shoulder. The creature then starts advancing toward them again. "Look at the beast coming, dude." The protagonist decides not to run from the situation along with the others and starts charging toward the monster, asking Hyunwoo to cover him. Now face to face with the creature, the protagonist dodges its attack and manages to aim at its left shoulder, firing a bullet with his power. This attack surely caused some damage since the creature. Hyunwoo observes that this is the moment for the final attack and the reward will be his. He fires again at the monster's face, but all he gets is a complete expression of rage from the creature. Hyunwoo is surprised by this, and the creature begins advancing toward him. At this moment, he wonders why his attacks have no effect on it. The monster manages to hit Hyunwoo with an attack that makes him lose his weapon. To make matters worse, it's now trying to stomp on him. When he thought it was over, his cousin jumps toward him and pulls him out of the creature's foot's path. She asks if he's okay, and he says he only got a scratch. Before doing anything, the creature is surprised by a bullet hitting its back from the protagonist. The protagonist tells Jua to take Hyunwoo to the next carriage while he deals with the creature. The senior is also there with the protagonist, and his status window still looks strange, just like before. The senior manages to escape and goes to the next carriage with Jua and Hyunwoo. Jua tells the protagonist to run, but the protagonist knows something's wrong at this moment since he doesn't know what this monster is, and apparently it's not even the level boss. At this moment, he notices that the status window of the creature is also changing, just like the senior's. If what he thinks is correct, the senior is more dangerous than this creature. Oh, come on, no, tell me. In the other carriage, the senior says they don't have time to waste with that loser, the protagonist. Jua asks what he's talking about, and he says they need to block the door immediately. She tries to stop him from doing anything, but he soon activates his skill and summons a barrier on the door. The protagonist, completely irritated outside, tells him to dismantle the barrier immediately. But when he realizes he's not getting any response, he goes back to fight the monster that's now right in front of him. The protagonist needs to deal with this guy somehow while dodging the creature's attacks. He doesn't know what the senior is thinking at this moment, but it's likely that everyone there will be at risk with the way things are going. He has no time to lose here and needs to get rid of the creature as fast as possible. As he charges toward it once again, he's caught off guard by a kick. The protagonist is sure he partially dodged the attack with his skill, but he didn't have much success. But luckily, he can still move. And if he's now in a world that's quite like a game, there should be a way to face this creature. That's when another red message appears saying that the creature's weak point at the moment is that it's only used to darkness and is highly sensitive to any light that comes in front of it. Seeing this detail leaves the protagonist surprised, especially given the size of this thing being sensitive to light. Size doesn't matter, huh? The protagonist, when he stops to think about it, realizes that the lights in the carriage have been off the entire time. He wonders what would happen if he decided to turn on the lights using his ability. He then uses his control-type skill on all the lights in the carriage, turning them on instantly. Just as the creature's weakness had said, the monster starts to become very dazed and weak when it is caught off guard by the sudden light in front of it. The protagonist's system warns him that a control-type ability couldn't deal high-scale damage to a high-level monster like this one. However, the protagonist ignores this warning since he couldn't leave things as they were. He then decides to grab an iron bar to fight as much as he can. He is then caught off guard when several blue portals appear, and from them some iron bars start flying toward the monster. He wonders if his system has finally decided to help him a little. The protagonist doesn't know what this is, but he knows he has to take advantage of it. The protagonist finally manages to charge his power into the iron bar and throws it toward the monster with all his strength. When the bar hits the creature, it seems to cause some kind of damage. Almost instantly, the bars coming from the blue portals begin to penetrate the monster. That's when the system informs the protagonist that the monster in front of him is now silenced. The protagonist says he doesn't know what happened just now, but he managed to handle the creature thanks to the iron bars that appear to help him. This thought is soon interrupted by the system, which says it has something to inform him about the boss. The protagonist asks if this creature wasn't the boss, and the system immediately asks if he realized that. He's sharp, huh? The protagonist confirms, saying he noticed some things that were quite obvious from the start. On the other side of the carriage, Jua tells the senior to remove the barrier immediately since her friend is on the other side. He grabs her wrists and tells her to shut up. She keeps insisting that they can't stay hidden while Sangi is fighting. The senior tells her to shut up again and says she should just do what he says. She tries to pull his hand off her wrist, but notices something strange happening as she starts losing her strength, even though she's an attack type. That's when Hyunwoo finally manages to get up and calls him a loser for tormenting a girl like that. When questioned, he goes on to ask if he's scared to be challenged for once in his life. He's drawing the senior's attention to buy time for Jua to free herself. At least he's smart. The senior falls for it like a fish and ends up kicking the poor guy hard in the stomach. The senior asks him if his parents never taught him some manners. Jua tells him to stop, asking if he's gone crazy. That's when a completely bizarre figure appears behind him, like his shadow, saying that he definitely hasn't gone crazy. Then a red message appears saying that this was the boss, a player-type monster named Lee Minja. Hey everyone! Before I wrap up, I just want to thank everyone who's liking, commenting, and sharing the videos. You guys are awesome. If it weren't for you, I would have dropped this just like those manhwas that disappear without an ending. So keep supporting because every like is a buff for the channel and every comment gives me plus 10 motivation to bring more content for you all. Thanks a lot and see you in the next video.